We can start in the paper about the socially oriented cooperative housing as an alternative to urban speculation, a comparison between three countries, Denmark, Spain, and the Netherlands. We develop a kind of and try to develop the concept within the social economy by socially oriented cooperative housing in an attempt to find to find a complementation to the private property housing and to the public or socially oriented public housing. We think that this kind of social orientation as a character of non-profitable activity to housing in urban environments, and we thought that it was a very central concept, right? Now, maybe Joris, can you add something about?
Yes, I think it's good to mention that in the empirical part of the paper, we have looked at how cooperative housing models have developed in the course of time in three different European countries. So we focused at Denmark, Spain, and the Netherlands. And what's very interesting is that all those three countries have a history of cooperative housing, but the development is very different. So you can see that in Denmark, there is a very substantial cooperative housing sector, but in Spain and in the Netherlands, even though cooperative housing has a history that dates back to the 19th century, for a long time it was very marginal, and I would almost say ignored by policymakers and residents until quite recently. Now that you can see that there's also a lot of attention emerging in Spain and the Netherlands for cooperative initiatives.
Yeah, in the three selected countries, cooperative housing is getting a renewed political and institutional interest while being in very different stages. In Denmark, the reestablished housing ministry has initiated new housing policies. In the Netherlands, since the introduction of the renewed housing law in 2015, the national government has started to stimulate housing cooperatives. And finally, in Spain, recently, socially oriented housing cooperatives are emerging within increasing support by regional governments.
I think that in the urban issues and housing issues are very central in our current market-based economies and capitalism. Urban environments and housing environments are becoming, kind of critical economic assets in market logics. We think that it's very important to address that problem of those issues. And in that respect, it's very important maybe to make and to increase attention and interest, but to have higher focus on housing policies and urban policies. In the majority of population are living in a urban context nowadays, and property is becoming a central issue in speculation dynamics. So how to counterbalance those dynamics? It was I think it's very central for most economists nowadays, worldwide, especially maybe in many European cities. That's why it's very important. It's a very central issue in base with not only mainstream economists, but also as a contribution by the social economy to contribute and to make economy more socially oriented and more, eager to equalities or more socioeconomic balances. That's, we think, is important, our contribution. Maybe Joris can supply a bit more about that.
Yes, I think what you said is very relevant, and I see also a strong connection between what we did and developments on the different housing markets in Europe. You can see that almost everywhere the private sector has become very expensive, so both private rental and home ownership. We see that the public rented sector is also often under pressure in many countries. So that leaves actually considerable room for cooperative housing, not only because it's potentially more affordable, but I think it also appeals to the desire of many people to take matters more in their own hands, to be less dependent on either the state or the market, and to try to find solutions for their housing problems out of their own initiatives. And that's actually what collaborative and cooperative housing is all about.
Yeah, and finally, research findings, the comparison between the three countries we compare, contribute to mutual learning processes in searching alternatives to the commercial and very expensive private housing provision.
The implications of where is next, or what can be next step in research. Maybe we can take two directions. One direction could be more focused on housing as a very critical asset in urban environments. It's very critical for societies how to evolve socioeconomically. We can also take another direction, which is within the social economy, which is a discipline within social sciences and economics, to expand the approach to economy by focusing stronger in the civil, associative, and cooperative character of many socioeconomic dynamics, maybe to try to expand that approach to other goods and services, both in the urban context and the rural context. So I'm thinking about sharing economies in urban context and how we share many of the goods and services in our environment, but also about thinking about the infrastructural services more in broader areas, in rural areas. To look at maybe both the directions, maybe if we have focus on housing, there are also a lot of possibilities to extend our research. Yeah, maybe Joris, can you continue maybe?
Yes, I think our research indeed has very important policy implications. As I mentioned before, particularly in Spain and the Netherlands, the cooperative sector is still, let's say, emergent. It's still very small, and we think there is considerable potential for the sector to develop more, but it doesn't go automatically, because we have also seen in our research that a lot of cooperative housing initiatives are hampered by lack of access to land, lack of access to finance, perhaps different rules or institutions that don't really comply with cooperative housing. So I think, yeah, from the side of the government, enable policies are really necessary if we want this sector to further grow and flourish.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and finally, there are still many issues that require further research. For example, it remains unclear whether housing cooperatives will be able to accommodate the most vulnerable groups, only middle income groups, and also spatial aspects of the phenomenon require further attention.